Well, today I'm with Toddington Harper, CEO of GRIDSERVE, and we're talking about battery use cases for EV charging. Welcome, Toddington.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show.
Now, you've got a site in Cornwall, one of your electric highway sites, I think, where batteries are very important. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about that site.
Yeah, so we're on a mission to make electric vehicle charging across the UK as easy as possible, enabling anyone, anywhere to charge a vehicle as quickly as they possibly can. And that doesn't necessarily correlate to how much grid capacity is available in each location where charging is needed. So we made a grid application a number of years ago, and we were told it would take several years for the site to be connected because of the grid challenges in the area. That doesn't work for people going on their summer holidays this year or their Easter break. And so we had to get creative, and what we did is we combined the grid capacity that was available, which was actually only 100 kilowatts. We combined that with a 1 megawatt hour battery, and so that's enough energy for roughly 4,000 miles if you do 4 miles a kilowatt hour. And what we're doing is we're constantly charging that battery until it's full. And then on the back of the battery, which is then a megawatt of energy, a megawatt hour of energy, but also a megawatt of charging power, we have six high power chargers, 175 350s. And so what that basically means is that a customer can turn up, they can use the site. It's actually the picture behind me is the chargers. Nobody really know the difference. But most of the time, the energy is actually coming out of the battery rather than the grid connection. We got it live a few months ago. We were always a bit nervous about it because it hadn't really been done as far as we're aware in the UK, certainly at this scale. But it passed the Easter break really well. It's passed some very busy bank holiday weekends, and customers just didn't know the difference. And it's actually performing very similar to other sites that do have grid connections, albeit in the background there's a lot of work going on.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe we can just show a few pictures of the site as we just talk through some of the things that you've just said. So this is the site here in Cornwall. So have you been pleasantly surprised then, Toddington, that it is performing so well? I mean, did you have concerns that obviously the battery would be drained pretty quickly?
Yeah, I mean that's always the concern, and that's actually what makes it very complex. Actually, kind of just connecting the power side of it isn't so tricky. But what you don't want to do is ensure that you run out of energy, very quickly, and then all of a sudden everyone's sharing 100 kilowatts between the 6 chargers. And so we have an algorithm, and we're constantly evolving it. We're learning from what's happening, and so in the really busy periods, it basically runs all night, and it's just drawing that 100 kilowatts as much as it possibly can. But we found it works really well. We also have, dynamic power control, so we're pushing power onto different chargers as well, which provides a great experience. You don't have to kind of assign it to one charger in particular, which again is really helpful from a customer perspective, because vehicles aren't all charging at the same time. And we also have controls that if we think that we're going to run out of energy, we can slow things down, so we can kind of share the energy more evenly. But it's a constantly learning. It's a constant process of learning. And we're getting better at predicting. What we also have on this canopy here is on top of it is a solar canopy, which is great. So particularly in Cornwall, particularly in the summer where it's very busy. And that's about 60 kilowatt peak of solar panels, which really helps as well. And actually there's a plan to put a 1 megawatt solar farm in as well, so we can kind of feed it. And solar's an incredible fit, because people generally charge on public charging infrastructure like ours during the day, and so it's just that's when the sun comes out, and in the middle of the day actually is where most people turn up, and it's where the sun is most prevalent. And so far so good. It's very tricky behind the scenes. It's been quite experimental. There's constant innovation, there's constant learning, but as I said, from a customer perspective, it meant that we could deliver this infrastructure much faster than would otherwise be the case. People can turn up and they can reliably charge, and actually in most cases they can charge as fast as they may at some of the other sites that have got much bigger grid connections.
Well, it's really interesting, just thinking about the implications of what you're saying. So I guess my first question on that is, does this change your thinking on other sites as well? Because there are often delays for connections. That's quite normal, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're called GRIDSERVE, you know, we're on a mission to move the needle on climate change, so that, you know, we have to deliver as humanity at an incredible scale and speed. I built a lot of renewable energy projects over the year, mostly solar projects and batteries, and therefore I understand the grid. And my view on this is that if we're going to be successful in rolling out infrastructure as quickly as it's needed, then we can't just kind of hope the grid's going to work. We need to, if you like, serve it. You know, so that's what we do. We provide infrastructure that doesn't impact the grid. In places, actually, we benefit as well the grid, because we can provide solutions that you know, can provide reactive power and so on to support with voltage in the area. You can you know, you can kind of move energy and shift it to times when it's low or high demand, and there's a combination of other things. So it's absolutely part of what we think about, because if we're going to deliver at the speed and scale that we need to, and we are delivering it at quite a pace, that we just have to, you know, deal with what's in front of us. And sometimes it's great, we can connect, and sometimes it's, you know, there's another site that we're running now, we've built a microgrid for, and that's actually got a second life battery in as well. And that was because the grid, you know, very busy services, and the grid, you know, connection just wasn't there at all and wasn't coming for many months. So, you know, again, that's in its trialing phase now. So we're constantly looking at solutions. You know, it would obviously be great if there was grid capacity everywhere and we could use it, and that's a lot less expensive solution. But ultimately, we need to give drivers the confidence to go electric. We need to give them that charging experience that, you know, really excites people. And by combining all these solutions and really understanding what the grid issues are and working out how you can fix them, then, you know, you put the different pieces together and you can deliver that.
No, it makes perfect sense. Do you think, I mean, looking at the Cornwall site, do you think it will get to a level of busyness where, you know, you will need that connection, and you're obviously still waiting for it?
Yeah. So yes, probably, albeit the solar farm, the 1 megawatt solar farm is, you know, we're pretty excited about that, because that will be a zero carbon project as opposed to a net zero. So literally solar electrons straight into vehicles. We think that's going to help a lot, particularly as the seasonality of Cornwall. You know, most of the impact will happen in the summer, we think, or the summer months. And so, you know, when you're, you know, able to produce energy that's available when you need it, that's incredibly helpful. We have continued with the grid application. You know, and we're still kind of wondering what we do when the grid comes in. You know, what we might decide to do is keep the battery there still, both for storing solar energy, but also perhaps for providing grid services, because there's clearly issues in the grid, and perhaps those issues need being fixed with the battery. So in that respect, the battery might not be using a business case of, you know, of kind of supplementing a weaker grid. It could be actually using a business case of kind of strengthening the grid in the area as a whole.
No, it makes sense. Just on the solar farm point, I mean, how, obviously thinking about some of the markets that, you know, that are represented by our group, you know, obviously solar in the UK is more of a challenge than it is in Saudi Arabia. We have a Saudi Arabian retailer in the group, you know, who obviously has a fantastic opportunity around solar. I mean, how is there much, would you agree with that? I mean, is there more of a challenge in the UK around solar, or is it surmountable?
Yeah, so you know, it's a question that people often ask: is there enough sunshine in the UK? And here's a stat for you: we can generate about 1 million miles of EV charging for every acre we put a solar farm on in the UK. That's a pretty remarkable fact, and that we can do that every single year. So this is picture. This is one of the sites that we've that we built. This took about 6 months, and of course, if you were to do that in Saudi Arabia, you'd be producing twice the amount of energy for every given area, roughly speaking. You know, you have higher temperatures, and that has a slight loss in efficiency, but nothing like what people are talking about. You know, in the news, you know, you'll definitely produce a lot more energy in places like that. It's a bit complicated though as well. You know, that there is a whole world of additional complexity around actually using solar energy to power electric vehicles, to charge and power electric vehicles, rather than just building a solar farm that feeds energy into the grid whenever it's, you know, whenever the sun is shining. So there's additional technologies and additional control systems and additional, you know, there's a lot to it, which you know, what our approach is to work out how we can standardize all of that learning, and then actually support other people around the world as well, who are looking to do the same things but haven't necessarily worked out how to, you know, do what we do. You know, a funny expression that, you know, we talk about what we do as sun to wheel, you know, as opposed to well to wheel. So using solar farms instead of oil wells, batteries instead of refineries, cables directly connected, or grids instead of pipelines and tankers, and electric vehicles instead of electric forecourts, and electric forecourts instead of petrol forecourts, and then electric vehicles. And that whole, putting all those pieces together is quite complex. And so, what we've realized is that if we're going to meet the challenges of the climate crisis, people, can't reinvent the wheel, let alone the sun to wheel. So what we're doing is using everything that we learn and building it as a platform to help accelerate other people, in the UK, but ultimately, outside the UK as well, who want to achieve the same things, but don't necessarily have, the same level of kind of learning that we've had.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Toddington. That was fascinating discussion on battery use, and really appreciate your time.
Super. Thanks for having me on.